The base sat under a curtain of gray sky, the air thick with salt and electricity. Fighter jets lined the center runway, their crews gathered in loose, confident clusters, laughing loud enough to carry over the wind. Boots slapped concrete, call signs barked over radios and a polished Humvee idled near the command shelter, engine purring like it belonged to someone important. At the edge of the lot, away from the action, a weathered P-3 Orion sat alone. Its paint was faded, its fuselage streaked from years of storm runs. No one took photos of it. No one bragged about flying it. Alex stepped out of the ops building without ceremony. Her flight suit was zipped to the neck, sleeves slightly creased. She moved quietly, her scuffed boots making no sound across the asphalt. In one hand, she carried an old flight manual, corners soft and curling from use. Her long blonde hair was pulled into a simple, low knot. She didn't wave or nod. She didn't need to. She was there to fly. She paused by the mission board mounted near the fueling shelter, its white laminate already fogging in the humidity. Her crew was listed under Orion 2 flight priority low. The first to spot her was Mark, standing beside the P-3's ladder with his hands on his hips. "She's the one they sent," he murmured. His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried surprise. Dana looked over next, arms crossed, face unreadable. Jalen leaned against the hull, chewing gum slowly. Maya, adjusting her console toolkit, glanced once and looked away. Nolan sat on a case of Sond canisters, rubbing at a boot scuff with the edge of his glove. None of them smiled. Alex reached the ladder and gave a brief nod. "Weather windows tight," she said, her voice low and steady. She didn't linger on introductions. She didn't ask for agreement. She looked at the aircraft, then at the sky, then turned toward the hatch. The others followed one by one, each carrying something: a case, a chart, a coil of cable, but no one carried trust. Not yet. Around them, the jets roared to life, all flash and fury. Alex said nothing. She walked up and disappeared inside. The briefing room buzzed with noise before the projector even flickered to life. Jet crews filled the space with laughter, sneakers tapping against the tile floor, jacket sleeves pushed high as they leaned across the table in mock battle poses. Every screen flashed fighter paths in bold red arcs. A commander barked something about timing the apex run, and a group broke into cheers. In the back row, Alex sat in silence. The seat beneath her was damp, a dark coffee ring staining the edge of the cushion. She didn't wipe it. She adjusted the stack of notes in her lap and listened. When her turn came, she stood. "We'll be operating under low-band radar interference," she said evenly. "I'd like confirmation on drift thresholds and cloud layer inversion readings for Sond dispersal." Someone coughed. A tall pilot in a pressed jumpsuit leaned forward. "Cloud babysitters go last," he said. The room burst into laughter. One of his crewmates clapped the table twice, his voice loud enough to carry. "Tell her to bring an umbrella," another chimed in, "and snacks. It's a long ride, on cruise control." The commanding officer didn't reprimand anyone. He just moved on. Alex sat down without a word. No one made space for her. The screen behind the main table displayed mission vectors. Fighter call signs appeared in full color, lines slicing across the gulf like lightning bolts. Her own flight path was off to the side, labeled in gray, a dotted curve that ended before it reached the storm's core. A placeholder. Dana stood nearby, arms folded. Mark leaned against the wall with one foot up, glancing between her and the screen. Nolan chewed a pen cap, expression unreadable. Jalen typed on a tablet without looking up. Maya kept fiddling with her sleeves, her mouth tight, her eyes flicking between exits. Later that morning, Alex climbed the ladder into the cockpit and paused. Hanging from the yoke was a plastic poncho, bright orange and zip-tied in place. A piece of tape across the front read, "Bring rain boots." She stared at it for a moment, then reached out and turned it so the writing faced the window. She didn't touch the zip tie. She sat down and began flipping switches, running her checklist with clinical precision. Behind her, voices in the cabin hushed. Mark arrived last. He saw the poncho, glanced at Alex, then said nothing. He took his seat and buckled in without comment. The P-3 was scheduled to launch after the fast response squadrons. On the tarmac, ground crews moved like a choreographed dance. Fighters taxied past in formation. Someone saluted as a Thunderhawk passed, its tail fin painted with flame decals. The tower gave clearance in clipped, energetic bursts. When Alex's call came through, it was quieter, delayed. Her runway slot had been shifted twice. No explanation. As they waited, the sun baked the windshield and the cockpit grew hot. Maya wiped sweat from her upper lip and muttered something under her breath. Dana ran a systems check again. Nolan tapped the glass with a knuckle, slow and steady. At the mess hall that evening, the tension didn't fade. Alex sat at the end of a long table, her tray untouched. Her crew was scattered along the same row but gave her space. Mark joined last, dropping his utensils with a loud clatter. At the next table over, a group of jet officers raised their glasses. To real flights, one of them said. His voice wasn't raised, but every syllable landed. The others chuckled. No one needed to look at Alex, but they did anyway. One tilted his glass slightly in her direction, a smirk just visible. Dana didn't glance up. Jalen pretended not to hear. Nolan raised one eyebrow and went back to eating. Maya stared at her water. No one commented on the moment. The meal continued. Plates clinked. Forks scraped. Alex folded her napkin and stood. Her tray remained untouched. She walked out without looking back. That night, in the barracks, she opened her locker. Inside, beside her folded uniform, lay her weather manual. The cover was frayed, pages soft at the edges. She pulled it out and flipped through the annotated charts. A piece of masking tape marked one corner, her brother's handwriting still visible in faded ink. She held it for a second, then slipped the book into her flight bag. It wasn't a weapon. It was a compass. By morning, the hangar was loud again. Pilots moved like they owned the floor, throwing jargon like fastballs, laughing in pockets of sunlight between open doors. Alex arrived early. She didn't approach anyone. She checked the aircraft alone. Fuel gauges, weather sensors, wing integrity. Every detail mattered. Every bolt had a voice. Her crew assembled behind her, one at a time. Mark watched her work with quiet interest, saying nothing. Dana murmured something to Nolan, who gave a half smile but didn't laugh. Jalen stared at his wrist display. Maya looked away when Alex caught her eye. They all boarded in silence. Inside the cockpit, the poncho was still there, zip-tied like a trophy. Alex left it. She ran the pre-start sequence while the jets outside fired up like thunder. The base was about performance, not precision. She understood that now. It wasn't just about flying. It was about being seen doing it fast. Before takeoff, the control tower confirmed final slots. Jet teams first, her Orion last. One voice on the channel chuckled and said, "Save us a postcard from the clouds." Another chimed in, "If she makes it that far." Alex responded only with call sign and altitude. Her voice was steady, clear, without inflection. The controller hesitated, then gave clearance. As the engines came to life and the propellers whirred into rhythm, the aircraft vibrated with stored energy. Alex glanced at the radar screen, already lit with movement. She touched a small mark on the glass, a point labeled deep within the storm's projected cone. She would get there. They would fly through it, not around it. But no one had to know that yet. She didn't need a crowd. She needed the data, and she would collect it without ceremony. Before the uniforms, before the flight hours and radar screens, there was the sound of gulls over the bay and the slow churn of a diesel engine pulling away from the dock. Alex had grown up in a town so flat and close to the water, you could see storms before they had names. Her family worked shrimp boats for 3 generations. The kitchen always smelled of seawater and oil, and everything valuable was tied down with a knot someone had taught her when she was 6. Her brother's name was Daniel. He was 5 years older and knew everything about the sky. He didn't read clouds like pictures, he read them like maps. When they fished, he showed her how to watch the shape of waves near the inlet, where the wind fell silent right before the gusts came back harder. He taped an old weather chart to the bulkhead of the boat and updated it by hand every week, tracking wind directions, salinity changes, and pressure dips. He let her help. She kept a pencil tucked behind her ear like he did. When she was 9, he handed her the radio and let her make their first report to the Coast Guard. She didn't know what normal was for other kids. She only knew storm drills and waterproofing. Sirens weren't rare. They were as common as school bells. When the wind shifted inland, they'd tape windows, tie off bowlines, and ride out the night with candles ready. Most times, the forecasts were close enough. But one year, they weren't. It had been a late-season hurricane. The name didn't matter. What mattered was that it sped up and veered east at the last second. FEMA hadn't called for evacuation yet. Boats had still been going out. Daniel was one of them. He'd told her he'd be back before nightfall. He wasn't reckless. He was prepared. He left a note on the map taped to the fridge, marking the inlet where he thought the tide would settle by afternoon. The wind rose too fast. The warnings came too late. His boat didn't return. They found a piece of it 4 days later near the outer marshes. The Coast Guard said it wasn't the storm's fault. It was a failure of prediction. They'd read the satellite pass wrong. The forecast lagged behind the reality. The evacuation order had come 1 hour too late. Alex didn't cry in front of anyone. She went quiet. She erased the note from the fridge but kept the map. She folded it into quarters and hid it behind the bookshelf. Years later, she had it framed in a thin, salt-stained wood. It hung beside her bunk. The ink faded. Daniel's scrawl still visible. She never blamed the sea. She blamed the data. After that, she studied storms the way some people study languages. She learned wind currents, thermal layers, humidity tables. She memorized the difference between convective bands and spiral feeders before she finished high school. While other kids went to homecoming, she worked with her uncle repairing sonar on shrimp rigs. She saved enough money to enroll at a small college with a meteorology program that nobody had heard of. That didn't matter to her. She wanted the raw data sets, the archived Doppler recordings, the real mistakes and how they happened. She earned her pilot's license after graduation. Her instructors called her steady, if a little too quiet. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to master systems. She learned prop engines, turbine engines, and then dual training on recon aircraft. She didn't care about speed. She cared about how long a bird could stay in the air, how much wind shear it could absorb, how it behaved at low altitude over cold water. Noe didn't invite her in. She applied 3 times. The 4th time, she got a call back. The program was short on long-range recon pilots with dual training in meteorological modeling. She didn't smile during the call. She said thank you, confirmed the training dates, and hung up. Then she walked out to the dock and sat there until the sun dipped low and the light turned copper over the water. In her kit bag, even now, she kept a shrimp knife wrapped in cloth. It was dull and not particularly useful in flight, but it reminded her where she came from. Her weather logbook, on the other hand, was functional. It held pages of hand-inked entries from past flights, old training notes, even copied sections from Daniel's map. She used it on every mission. Not for nostalgia, for accuracy. She trusted paper more than screens. Machines could fail. Paper told the truth. When others flew, they logged hours and bragged about altitude. She logged humidity drift and oxygen saturation levels. She didn't take photos of her cockpit. She didn't post call signs. She recorded weather events, filed observations, and checked them 3 times before submitting. She never wanted recognition. She wanted a better outcome. Every time she was assigned to a storm, she studied it like it was personal, because it was. Every delayed warning, every missed model update, it was someone else's Daniel waiting for a call that would come too late. She had seen what happened when people trusted headlines instead of data. She had lived in the aftermath. That was why she never raised her voice in meetings. That was why she didn't correct the smirks or defend her aircraft. She didn't care who got the glory. She cared who got the warning in time. She had already lost one brother to silence. She would not lose another to noise. Alex flew because she knew what it meant when the data failed, and she would never let that map go blank again. The P-3. Orion lifted off in a slow arc, its propellers humming steady as the runway disappeared below. Alex sat forward, eyes scanning each dial as the aircraft rose through the cloud shelf. Above them, the jets were already airborne, cutting vapor trails across the sky like knives. They'd launched first, just as scheduled. Fast and loud and confident. Alex said nothing. She adjusted the throttle slightly and eased into cruise. Her crew remained quiet during the first stretch. Standard patterns, standard readings, smooth air. For the first hour, it felt almost routine. They hit checkpoint 1 with minimal correction. Maya confirmed Doppler stability. Jalen noted mild shear at 11,000 feet, well within range. Mark tapped a pen against his kneeboard, bored more than concerned. Dana checked power draw and muttered something about the turbine sounding cleaner than expected. Nolan yawned and stretched, then buckled back down. Outside, the sky darkened by degrees. Then the first call came over comms. A fighter team returning early. "We're scrubbing," the voice said. "Turbulence is too hot. Tail sensors are misreading by 5%. Recommend fallback." Static crackled. Another voice cut in. "Altimeter's jumping. We've lost vertical stability. Repositioning to standby grid." Then silence. Alex listened without flinching. She didn't answer. She kept the Orion steady, one hand on the yoke, the other flipping through a stack of reference pages tucked beside her seat. Her fingers found the old chart she had taped near the bulkhead, a hand-drawn flight arc plotted over sea level rise. It wasn't official. It was more accurate. The clouds grew thicker, pulling light from the cabin. Lightning flared across the port side, brief and sharp. The plane jolted. Mark stiffened. "That's a serious shift," he said. "We should consider turning back before we get boxed in." Jalen frowned at his display. "These models don't match," he said. "Pressure's dropping too fast. Either we're behind the forecast, or something's forming that no one called." Dana's voice cut in flat. "Command doesn't know what they sent us into." Maya flinched at another gust. "This isn't what they briefed," she said. Her hands hovered over her console like she wasn't sure whether to brace or log data. Only Nolan stayed silent. He watched Alex. Alex adjusted the altitude setting by hand. She flicked off one autopilot input, then cross-checked wind shear against a satellite overlay clipped to her knee. Her thumb ran the edge of a backup compass bolted just above the console. Her brother's weather log rested in a strap beside her leg, its edge worn from use. She said, without raising her voice, "We go." No one answered, not with words, but they didn't protest again. She adjusted their vector, dropping them slightly to gain steadier flow under the main rotation. The aircraft bucked harder now, pressure shifting like a fist pushing against the fuselage. The storm radar flared in Maya's screen, red and yellow blooms forming like wildfire. "That's the eye," she said. Her voice was thin. "We're flying into it." Alex nodded once. Lightning flashed again. Closer. The aircraft shook from nose to tail. Mark reached for a bag and didn't quite make it in time. Dana didn't react. She was already reading a diagnostic strip. adjusting generator load on the fly. Jalen gave up on the model overlays and started recalculating manually, pencil dragging across a notepad. "We're going to hit another wall," he said. "I can't see a clean pass." Alex didn't look at him. She flipped open the analog altimeter, scanned it, then made a tiny course correction. The lights dimmed. For 2 full seconds, everything went gray-blue inside the cabin. Maya sucked in a breath and closed her eyes. The hum of the engines dropped by half, then surged again. Dana swore under her breath and punched a key. Nolan braced against the frame, watching each of them in turn. Alex stayed level. The turbulence wasn't intermittent anymore. It had rhythm, a constant upward and downward lurch that sent their bones one direction while the plane pulled the other, the kind of motion that breaks discipline in weaker crews. She kept her grip soft. She knew better than to fight the wheel when the air was alive. Her brother had taught her that. "Altitude check," she said. Jalen answered without hesitation. Holding at 9,800, she glanced to Maya. Next arc, Maya blinked, checked her radar, and said, 5 miles to the window. "If we're going, it's now." Alex nodded. "Go." The dropson system clicked into life, instruments unfolding with metallic chirps. Maya initiated the sequence. 2 beacons dropped in a timed cascade, sensors spinning, data streaming back, wind speed, temperature, pressure, moisture curves. The entire storm profile bled into their network in real time. Outside, the wind screamed. The propellers howled in resistance. The aircraft tipped slightly, caught in a crosswave. Alex leaned into it. She didn't blink. Mark stared ahead. He looked pale. "We're through the worst of it." "Right?" he asked. No one answered. Another jolt slammed the plane. A panel clattered loose in the rear compartment. Dana caught it mid-drop and shoved it back in place. Jalen gritted his teeth as his tablet slid sideways. Maya locked her console and gripped the rails on either side. Nolan's hands were on his lap, open, calm. Alex looked once at the storm radar, then at the analog compass, then forward. They were inside the eye. Everything stopped. The wind vanished. The shaking ceased. Light filtered in from above in broken streams, like the roof of the world had opened just for them. Below, the water spun in a perfect spiral, black and steel and still. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. It wasn't fear. It was reverence. Alex leaned back slightly, adjusted trim, and held steady. Maya whispered, "We made it." Jalen resumed tracking. Dana monitored core temperature. Mark looked over at Alex, eyes wide, and said nothing at all. The aircraft coasted forward through the eye. They would finish the loop. They would finish every arc of that storm, no matter what came next. Not because anyone told them to. Because she did. Alex didn't smile. She didn't need to. This was her command now. In the silence of that sky, the crew followed her without question. The silence inside the storm was unlike anything they had ever known. The constant shaking and engine strain gave way to stillness so complete it felt like entering another world. Around them, the walls of the hurricane eye curved upward like the inside of a cathedral, streaked with light and motionless vapor. Sunlight pierced through broken cloud seams, casting silver across the ocean's surface below. The plane floated in it, suspended in a calm that felt unnatural. Maya sat rigid at her console, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly over the controls. Her screen lit up with green waves and clean readouts. "I've never seen it this clear," she whispered. "The arc is stable. Every pass point is clean." No one interrupted her. The sound of her voice was like a breath, held too long, finally exhaled. Jalen took his cue and reached for the dropsonde release. His fingers fumbled once before steadying. He keyed in the deployment sequence, then braced himself against the sway of the aircraft. The release clunked through the cabin, followed by the soft whine of the pod disengaging. They watched it drop into the calm spiral below. a single dot falling through thousands of feet of air without resistance. Sensors came online within seconds. Temperature bands, humidity curves, crosswind shifts. The full anatomy of the storm streamed into their data core. Maya's screen pulsed with confidence intervals. Jalen double-checked everything manually. He didn't question a thing. Then the lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor panels. The auxiliary generator surged, then sputtered. Dana didn't wait. She was already up, one hand on the panel, the other calling out power draw levels. Nolan slid beside her, flipping open the backup channel route. "We're running hot," Dana muttered. "We've got maybe 2 minutes to reroute or we lose relay." Alex didn't flinch. She reached forward, opened the analog distribution chart, and tapped the third quadrant. "Cut nav backup. Give it all to relay." Dana grunted in acknowledgement and made the switch. The lights held steady. The pod's data kept coming. The crew looked up. The data was live, continuous, complete. Not one dropout. Not one corrupted burst. Maya shook her head slowly, stunned. "We got it," she said. "We actually got it." Outside, the view remained unchanged. The inner eye was still wide open. Wind patterns rotated far below, but never reached them. Alex adjusted trim manually, guiding the plane along the circular path they had planned days earlier. Her flight path, sketched by hand on a clear sheet taped above the console, was now becoming real. The aircraft moved inch by inch along the curve, not just surviving the storm, but mastering it. Mark turned his head and looked at her. His voice was low, not for secrecy, but respect. No one else made it this far. He didn't say it like an apology. He said it like fact. Jalen finished logging the third data loop and nodded toward her. "We're inside the model now," he said. "We don't need forecasts. We're making them." Dana checked her display again and spoke quietly. "That generator's holding. I don't know how, but it's holding." The aircraft curved through the final quadrant of the storm eye, sensors still streaming. Maya's hands moved with confidence now. The tremble was gone. She marked timestamps without hesitation. Nolan leaned against the cabin wall, not to rest, but to take in the view. His eyes were on the clouds. There was awe in his silence, not fear, not doubt, just awe. Alex said nothing. This was the moment the crew became hers, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Not a single one of them had expected to make it this far. None of them had trusted the plan when they launched. But now, they sat inside the storm, wrapped in the data that no one else had captured, flying a path no one else had completed. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. She adjusted course one final time, guiding the Orion toward the exit vector. The sky ahead was darker now, signaling the next wall they'd need to fly through, but no one spoke of turning back. No one checked the abort protocol. Maya glanced once more at her screen. Every frame logged. She said, "This is full profile. Start to core." Jalen looked to her, then to Alex, and added, "And back again." The crew fell quiet again. It was not the silence of tension. It was the silence of arrival. The pod disappeared below them into the spiral sea. Maya closed her screen. Jalen wrote the final entry into the manual log. Dana sat down, arms crossed, and didn't say another word. Nolan pulled out a small pen light and checked the emergency panel again, even though he didn't need to. Mark reached up and tapped a control he had already checked, as if looking for something to do. Or maybe just grounding himself. Alex touched the edge of the map above her. Her brother's pattern had led her here. Every correction she had made since takeoff had brought them to this one impossible place and through it. She didn't smile. She banked slightly and began the turn out of the eye. The crew adjusted in their seats. No orders were given. No reassurances were needed. The turbulence would come again. The winds would return. But they were flying out together, as one. And for the first time, they weren't wondering if she could lead them. They were following because she already had. The wheels touched down on soaked concrete with a hiss, the weight of the aircraft pressing into the earth like it had returned from somewhere few had ever gone. The engines throttled down in even rhythm, their pulse falling lower with each second. Rain tapped against the fuselage, soft but steady. Outside the hangar, a line of jets sat idle. Their crews remained dry under overhangs, eyes drawn to the P-3 Orion now taxiing into view. It was the last to launch, and the only one returning from the eye. Inside the cockpit, Alex powered down the final system. Her hands moved without pause. Each switch flicked in the same order she had always used. She didn't glance around to check who was watching. She didn't need to. The silence in the cabin told her everything she needed to know. Maya was the first to break it. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. "We got it all," she said. There was no celebration in her tone, just the quiet certainty of someone who had seen the impossible done and would never forget it. Nolan dropped into the nearest seat, eyes still wide. He didn't say a word. He just let his head fall back against the bulkhead and exhaled the air he'd been holding since the turn home. Mark opened the cabin door, stepped out into the mist, and looked around. Dozens of eyes followed him. For the first time, he didn't walk behind Alex. He didn't try to explain anything or offer a smirk. He just stood on the tarmac as she followed, watching the heads turn in their direction. The command staff was already approaching. A tech crew ran ahead, laptop cases bouncing as they sprinted across the wet ground. One of them pointed to the hatch and shouted, "We need that data now." Another reached for Maya's hand, helping her down even as she clutched the console readouts to her chest. Jalen handed off the primary log without needing to be asked. The tech took one look and muttered, "This changes everything." Inside the mission center, FEMA analysts clustered around incoming feeds. Within the hour, evacuation maps were updated. Entire zones shifted inland. One of the techs turned to a nearby aide and said, "Only one aircraft gave us the core pass." The aide looked at the screen and asked, "Who flew it?" Back on the tarmac, the crew gathered behind Alex. She didn't call them. They stood on their own, one by one. Mark stepped to her side. Jalen took a position just behind. Maya hovered slightly back but close. Dana crossed her arms, the rain beating off her sleeves. Nolan stood a little apart, but didn't leave. The hangar crews watched from the shadows. Quiet now. Mark extended a hand. No words, just motion. Alex shook it once, firm and without pause. Jalen met her eyes and nodded once. Dana said, "Damn good work." It wasn't loud, and it wasn't for show. Maya gave her a small, grateful smile, then looked away quickly. Nolan didn't speak. He just moved to stand beside her when the FEMA coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. The coordinator handed her a printout. It was the completed log, sealed, time-stamped. Her name was at the top in bold lettering, Flight Leader Alex. She took it, folded it in half, and tucked it into the side of her jacket without comment. In the main operations room, a large screen refreshed. It showed a topographic storm map with several gray flight paths. Most ended early or turned back mid-arc. One line, bright green, traced the full loop through the eye. That was the only one labeled with a name, Alex. The staff didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared. Behind her, the crews who had laughed and mocked said nothing. One pilot in a soaked jacket turned to his wingman and muttered, "We owe her." The other didn't argue. He just nodded. Later, in the debrief, NOAA issued a public summary. It stated plainly that only one recon flight had completed a full eye penetration with continuous data return. It named the aircraft, the timestamp, and the outcome. No dramatic adjectives, just fact. That was enough. A local weather feed picked up the story. They overlaid the green flight path across the state coastline, then pulled back to show its relation to the evacuation shift. Viewers saw a single line curve through the most dangerous part of the storm. Hold, and exit clean. The voiceover simply said, one aircraft made the pass that changed the map. That flight was led by Alex. Outside, As the rain began to thin into mist, Alex remained by the aircraft. The Orion's nose still glistened with water, the propellers still turning slowly. She reached up and touched the fuselage once, then lowered her hand. She didn't turn when the camera crew arrived. She didn't need to speak. Her crew stayed near, no longer doubtful, no longer distant. They stood with the calm of those who had seen leadership proven not in command, but in presence. The storm map behind the mission desk glowed softly in the dim room. Her flight path, that single arc of green, stood untouched, a silent reminder of what had been risked and what had been delivered. Alex didn't ask for praise. She didn't expect recognition. But when it came, it landed with weight, not because of how loud it was, but because of how fully it was felt. On that soaked runway, among men who once rolled their eyes at the old aircraft and the woman who flew it, silence finally shifted into something else. Respect. The air was still thick with salt and moisture, but the winds had died. Rain no longer beat against windows or hangar walls. It lingered now only in puddles and steam rising from the concrete. The storm had moved inland. The base, once full of sound and motion, had quieted. Only the low hum of equipment and distant engine checks drifted through the morning haze. Alex sat alone in the mission planning room, her flight suit zipped halfway, the sleeves damp where rain had soaked through. Her boots were still wet. She hadn't changed. She hadn't left. The room smelled of paper, fuel, and the faint static buzz of old electronics. She leaned back in the chair without leaning into it, spine straight, shoulders relaxed. The large screen mounted on the wall behind her scrolled slowly through FEMA's updated storm projection. The map pulsed in soft blue and white overlays. New evacuation zones flashed along the coastline, redrawn with precision. At the top of the screen, above the data points and storm markers, was a single line of text in clean, capital letters. Revised projection based on Orion 2 data. Below that, her name appeared. Alex, Recon Flight Lead. She didn't look at the screen. She had already seen it. What held her attention was the flight manual resting on the table before her. Its cover curled slightly at the edges, worn thin along the spine. Her fingers rested on it gently, like one might touch something alive. Tucked inside, half visible beneath the first page, was a fabric patch. It was old. The stitching faded, the corners soft. The words still read clearly. Stay on target. The envelope it came in lay folded nearby. No note, no signature. She hadn't needed one. Only Dana would have kept something like that. Only Dana would have passed it on without asking for thanks. In the room behind her, the voices of her crew floated in and out of hearing. They weren't loud, but they were present. Jalen leaned against the far whiteboard, scrolling through the full mission log on a shared tablet. He hadn't made any changes. Not one edit. He had posted it to the team channel exactly as it was. Complete. Clean. Uninterrupted. Maya stood in front of the board now, a marker in her hand. She had drawn the eye of the storm in a simple spiral, wide and open, with their entry and exit arc cutting through the center. It was not dramatic, just accurate. She paused once, then circled the route they had flown in thick blue ink. Nolan passed behind her, glanced at the drawing, and added a word beside it. Only. No one laughed. No one needed to explain it. Mark walked in from the hallway and paused at the door. His hair was still damp. He looked rested for the first time in days. He glanced at the screen, then at her. If you ever fly again, he said, I'd back you. There was no smile in his voice, but no doubt either. It was a promise without ceremony. Alex nodded once and turned back to the manual. She opened it halfway and slid the patch deeper into the spine, tucking it where it wouldn't fall loose. She didn't speak. Her hand rested there a moment longer before closing the book. She didn't need to say what it meant. The whiteboard across the room now showed the completed arc, the storm's stillness captured in a few clean lines. Maya stepped back. Jalen crossed his arms. Nolan tapped his pen against the edge of the frame. Dana stood beside the far console, looking out the window with her back to the room. She hadn't said anything since the envelope. Alex rose slowly, her boots scuffing against the tile as she crossed to the window. Outside, the tarmac shimmered with reflected sky. The outline of the P-3 Orion stretched across the surface like a shadow. It looked still. It looked ready. Its wings were slick with morning mist, its body calm in the afterlight. The monitor behind her changed again, now showing radar imagery of the weakened storm pushing across farmland. Fields would flood, roads would wash out, but people had moved early this time. The warnings had gone out with hours to spare. The window had been enough, Chimoy. She had given them that. She turned back from the window and walked to the table. The flight manual went into her bag with practiced ease. She zipped it shut and slung it over her shoulder without adjusting the strap. Her boots still left wet prints behind her as she moved. She didn't stop to wipe them. The crew began to disperse, each one lingering a moment near her before stepping away. No goodbyes, no praise, just presence. Alex walked out into the hallway alone. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. The echo of her steps was soft, absorbed by the walls that had once echoed laughter at her expense. No one stopped her. No one stared. Outside, the air had cooled. The clouds were thinning. Sunlight broke through in sharp lines, slicing across the pavement, casting long shadows behind her. The P-3 waited in the distance, silent, unchanged. But everyone who had watched it land knew better. She didn't look back at the planning room. She didn't need to. The map would still be glowing. Her name would still be there. The data would still hold. Alex kept walking. Another storm would come. She didn't know when, but she would be ready. Not because she had something to prove, but because she already had. In a world that often rewards volume over value, Alex proved that real leadership does not need to shout. She walked into the storm without applause and returned with the only data that mattered. Her strength was not in force, but in focus. She was doubted, overlooked, and left out, yet she held steady while others turned back. And in doing so, she saved lives. This story is not just about flying into a hurricane. It is about trusting your purpose, even when no one else does. It is about leading with quiet resolve and letting your actions speak when words fall short. If Alex's journey moved you, take a moment to reflect on your own. Have you ever held steady when others pulled away? Share your story in the comments, and follow for more quiet, powerful moments, just like this one.